First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you very much for joining us. We are live streaming here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. This is something we do every weekday at 11 a.m. and at 1 p.m. So in between other newscasts there, we are here bringing you all kinds of things, including longer form segments and interviews. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're talking about Steve Prefontaine, of course, the legendary track runner and so much more from the University of Oregon and beyond. And it has been 50 years since Steve Prefontaine's death, but he is still very much celebrated. And there's a new book out that is all about that. It's called The Front Runner, The Life of Steve Prefontaine, with some brand new interviews and all kinds of different things associated with that to celebrate that memory. And to talk all about that, we have joining us right now, Brendan O'Meara, the author. And there's an event actually coming up with the Oregon Historical Society this weekend as well. So I want to let people know all about that coming up. But Brendan, thank you very much for joining us here today to talk about this. And, Steve Prefontaine holds, I think, a real special place for a lot of people from the state of Oregon, but even beyond that. And for you, I'm always curious, how people got started in this. So what was it about Steve Prefontaine that made you want to go ahead and write a book about him?
As a biographer, it's usually pretty helpful to cast your gaze, say, like 5 or 10 years in the future and think, like, what are some big anniversaries coming up? And it always makes for a good hook. And so a few years ago, I was thinking, okay, well, the 50th anniversary of Steve's passing is arriving. There hadn't been anything really definitive written on him in decades. And so I figured, I started cobbling together, saving some string, and it came together in a sense to really write a definitive reappraisal of his life through a modern rubric. He hasn't changed much. He died so young, but the world has changed a whole lot. And what he's come to embody has really come to pass. And to be able to look at him and reevaluate, like I say, reappraise him in that modern rubric was just super exciting. And he's a super captivating figure to spend a few years with.
Yeah, he really is. There's so much there. When you go about this, how did you go about finding some of these stories and finding some of these people, that maybe knew him and to tell some of this side of Steve?
Yeah, what's wild, that is the challenge, and made somewhat easier by certain, you become somewhat of a good internet stalker when you're doing research of this nature. And so, maybe you're going to classmates.com and you're finding scans of old yearbooks. And in yearbooks, you got team photos. And I was like, okay, there's a whole bunch of names there. You write all these names down. Then you go and maybe you look on Facebook or whitepages.com or Fast People Search and try to find all these phone numbers. A lot of these people who are forgotten to the record, who weren't famous, who only ran in high school, but they all have their little slice of Steve Prefontaine. And so you find all these people in the newspaper record or in old yearbooks, and you just call like crazy, and you find a lot of dead phone numbers. You go to voicemail a lot, rarely, but those sometimes people just don't want anything to do with you, and that's their prerogative. But you pitch yourself as quickly as you can, and hopefully they call you back, and then you just get them talking about like what their earliest memories were, what was their slice of his life, and you do this hundreds of times. And compound that with the newspaper and the magazine record that is so easily at our fingertips now with wonderful resources like newspapers.com and other digitized sources, and then some physical sources as well, be it at the University of Oregon Special Collections. And through all that research, you really start to get a more three-dimensional portrait of a person. And what I had come to see from Steve over the decades was a very something of a two-dimensional portrait, this brash, arrogant runner. And of course, he was at times brash and at times arrogant, and certainly a runner. But there was far more to him, and it was always my goal to write a more intimate portrait of him. And you do that through finding people that aren't that all have their own little slice, and that 3D printer starts to really give you a more rounded picture of him. And then you're getting to a portrait that is more a man behind the myth and behind the legend. And I like to think that's what I accomplished with The Front Runner.
Wow, so the actual person himself, the accomplishments being what they are, but finding out more about what he was like interacting.
Exactly.
Doing all of this research and these interviews, what was one of maybe the most surprising things that you found out about Steve Prefontaine through this?
Yeah, I would say one of the most surprising things of the many, which was such a joy and the very serendipitous part of the reporting and the research as well. Sometimes you just come across these little things like a one-off paragraph at the end of a story, and it was just like this a group of women, three names of women that Steve coached in 1974, a year before he passes. And I had never known that Steve mentored any runners, in particular women runners. And so I was able to track down two of the three and had great conversations here in Eugene with them. And one woman, she still has the workouts he wrote out for her, the letters. You'd be like, okay, meet me on Monday. And there's, Steve's left-handed scrawl and, some of his bad grammar and everything. But he wrote out his workouts just like they were the workouts that his high school coaches and Walt McClure and Phil Persian drew up for him, and then certainly Bill Bowerman and Bill Dellinger at the University of Oregon. And he's giving that wisdom to not only just other runners who could benefit from it, but lifting women up. In the last part of his life, he was very much about lifting others up. And that was just one of the more charming and serendipitous things that I found in the book, of the many things that were really surprising and pretty cool.
That's amazing. I mean, I like that idea too, that he's continuing on, the knowledge that he got, that structure that he had, and then passing that on and as you mentioned, helping lift people up. I mean, what is it, do you think, about Steve Prefontaine? What is it about Prefontaine that just makes him resonate so well, even this many years after his passing, with so many people?
Yeah, he was really ahead of his time in terms of the way he thought about his presentation and his showmanship. You could place him in today's era and slap him on Instagram, and you could be like, wow, this guy was made for today. He was charismatic and very good with the press. He made for great copy, which just drew more attention to him, and he always gave people fresh perspectives, not canned stuff that we hear from a lot of athletes. And he had the look, and he was something of an athlete activist at a time when that was, not particularly popular at the time, certainly among middle distance running. And here was someone who's pushing against power structures. He's thinking of his branding and his image when those terms were never used. Nowadays, athletes they're all about their branding and their how they're packaged, so to speak. And Steve was very much thinking of that, not in those terms, but a result of being on the cover of Sports Illustrated and having all this national attention bestowed upon him. Yeah, he was very much made for the modern day. And the original subtitle of the book was, Steve Prefontaine in the Dawn of the Modern Athlete, because he really was on the leading wave of what we have come to know as a modern athlete, thinking of themselves beyond their playing field, and in this case, the running in circles on a track.
Wow, I mean, and you're so right too, because you think about the picture of him, with his mustache, with running, and with that same haircut too that he had, and just, yeah, I mean, it really does stand out even all these years. And I didn't even think about that as a brand, but he did. He had that going. Let's talk about this weekend. So the Oregon Historical Society, you're going to be there. Tell us, what people can expect from this book talk that's going to be going on down there.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be, a really lively, fun conversation about some of the things that we already scratched the surface on. Some of the research of the book and trying to find new things about him that hadn't already been said, so it didn't just feel like a regurgitation of things that we had already known. Just given that we have 50 years of perspective since his passing and how the world and the sporting landscape has changed, I think we can look forward to just hearing about, those insights, and then, crafting a point of view and a structure of the book, and, how it came to pass, how it was shaped. And yeah, just how happy he would be with the state of track and field today. Like, sure, it's got its problems, but the fact that these athletes are making a buck and they don't have to tether themselves to a menial day job because that would otherwise thwart their amateur status and they can't run in the Olympics. Like, he would see all these people making a buck and seeing the world championships descend on Eugene. He brought international talent over in 1975 when that was never done before, and in strict defiance of the Amateur Athletic Union. And to see international talent routinely descend at Hayward Field, I think it would truly, he was a sensitive guy. I think it would truly have brought a tear to his eye.
Well, I mean, you look at, what the University of Oregon and what that program has turned into. As you mentioned, the world descending there, and that's Steve Prefontaine. That's him starting all that off, really. So.
Yeah, he gave Nike the altitude it needed to become the behemoth it would eventually become. So I think in a lot of ways you can say like the new Hayward Field is, in a sense, the house that pre-built.
Wow, amazing. Well, Brendan, thank you very much for joining us here too. And I want to let people know, if people want to get a hold of this book and check out all of this amazing work that you've done, what's the best way for them to do that?
I always push people more towards, say, local booksellers. So you could go to Powell's down there in Portland, any of those branches, or if you're an online shopper, going to bookshop.org, which really helps with an independent bookseller. So it's available anywhere, and I always encourage local booksellers and bookshop.org for sure.
All right. Well, Brendan, thank you very much for joining us here to talk about this and to just go through it. I really appreciate it. And yeah, man, thanks for being here on Fox 12 Now.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here. And I hope to see some of the viewers out there Sunday at the Oregon Historical Society.
Absolutely. And it's a great place to go to, just on top of everything else, and in addition to coming down there for that. So thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
And for everybody watching, this is Fox 12 Now. We live stream here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom. We do this every weekday, so I encourage you to check out all of our past episodes and segments and other things that we do here. It's like I mentioned, a wide range, so this could be if there's breaking news. This is also the place to go between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. I'll be here for you with that. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and sign off for right now. I will talk to you soon. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox